In the final episode of season 1, I talked to Claire Grocott. Claire is a designer, an artist, a mother, and she's also my older sister. I really wanted to end the season on this episode because I really feel like Claire embodies so much of what came up in season 1. She's come back to herself after being told she should be doing XYZ her whole life. She lives and is connected to nature and her community. She has defined her own version of success in a world where success and what being successful is can at times be a little narrow-minded. It was really cool to have this conversation with her and to listen back to it, and I really just admire who Claire is, the life she's built, and who she is as a person. So sorry, Claire, you'll hate that. But thank you everyone for listening to this podcast. I just started it thinking 0 people would listen, and many more have actually listened. So I really appreciate it, and I look forward to sharing season 2 with you soon. So what does it feel like? What does it feel like to be kind of connected back and in touch with your creativity and the creative side of your... No, you have to, I'm not answering, quite asking again.
Okay. So I think it feels amazing because it has allowed me to be playful again and let go of perfectionism. So I think I've actually avoided being creative for a long time because I would want to paint something or draw something and it wouldn't look how I wanted it to. So I would, leave it and think, oh, I'm crap at this and I'm not going to do it anymore. But I've kind of realized that it's just play. Like, it's my way of playing and being free, experimenting. No one has to see what I've made. It's a really awesome way to connect with the kids. I think that's been a massive thing. It's like if I'm drawing or painting or whatever I'm doing and I'm disappointed with what I've done because it's not perfect, then they're picking up on that. So learning that it's just about play and experimenting, and there's no right and wrong. I think I can be quite rigid in my thinking, and so creativity, I think, allows you to just let go of perfectionism and rigid thinking, and it's just about trying a whole lot of different stuff and seeing what comes out of that. And it's also been really good for my self-confidence and self-esteem and just feeling like an individual again rather than just a carer. So it's great. I think it's a really important thing for everyone to do and have.
Yeah, because I think when women become mothers, it feels like it's so easy for the other parts of yourself to just disappear, and the motherhood can take over. But really, there are still all of these other interests and parts of yourself that exist.
Yes, 100%. And I will say that's just in the early days and the early months and years even. That is just how it is. Like, young children need so much, and I think that's fine. You just have to remind yourself that there is life on the other side, and not lose sight of that. And I think I probably left it too long to go and kind of create my own thing when the children were slightly bigger. But yes, I think you do lose yourself for a couple of years, and that's actually okay. It's hard, but it's okay.
Yeah, maybe actually that what you just said is that it's the expectation that
totally,
everything will be the same and you should feel the exact same way and blah, blah, blah.
Totally. And I don't know why society, and then you feel like you're doing something wrong if you're not working or you're not earning money or traveling. I remember when the kids were little feeling so, I don't know, embarrassed or something that we just never went anywhere. We weren't doing any trips or anything, but it's actually so hard to do those things. And I don't know why everybody has to pretend that everything will be the same because
Yes.
it's not.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And it's okay that it's different.
And
And
it's a season.
yes,
It's a moment in time.
yeah, yeah, totally. And then, sorry, well, I really want to talk to you more about like parenthood and stuff, but going back to you're a graphic designer, I would say you're just like, just in general, like, like a creative person in terms of what you do, but also the appreciation for it. But it's not something that necessarily you were not comfortable with, but like embraced earlier on, if that makes sense. Like you're intellectual, you're very smart. And so it maybe was something that you squashed down. So I'm actually, yeah, just curious to hear like your experience and journey with embracing this part of yourself.
I've been thinking about this a lot lately too. I think I was definitely an academic kid, and that was where our parent, I don't think they did it on purpose, but that was the direction that you go with the stream.
Yes.
And I went to a smart kids year 5 and 6 class. I went to a selective high school, and so I was an academic kid. And I think that's why I didn't even realize that now looking back now, as a young child, I was creative. I think Dad's got a whole lot of photos and stuff of things that I made. And I've always loved beautiful things and
Yeah.
design. And looking back now, I can see that. Think it was probably just kind of missed. I was naturally, gifted and talented in the academic. That label is so disgusting and
But it's true,
damaging.
like you're smart, like you
I
are a
was
smart
smart. I was,
person.
yes. I
Still,
also
I'm
think
not past tense, but
I also think I've always been very rigid and a perfectionist and scared of getting things wrong. And that is the opposite of creativity,
yeah.
and learning to be okay with failing or making something that is not how I want it to look, or just doing something that I'm not proud of necessarily, or doesn't look right. I couldn't do that a few years ago. I was too worried about being wrong and making mistakes. And so I've really had to learn to let go of that and to be okay with experimenting and taking on feedback and not taking that personally and all that kind of thing. So that's been a huge kind of area of growth for me, I think. And I've just started in the last few weeks. When I say you, I've just done a collage artwork, and I just sat down and I had some leftover paints. And so I painted color swatches, and I just made this thing without worrying about it or thinking about it. And it was so satisfying. And it actually looks really good. Not to blow my own trumpet, it's in a frame on the
Also, you're
wall.
smart, plus your collage is like amazing.
But it's you just have to move into a different mindset. It's the opposite of perfectionism, I think. The ability to be creative, and I think every child is this pure creative spirit, and then as you grow up and you learn that you can make mistakes, or if there's right and wrong, that I think that's one of the main reasons children lose their creative kind of spark and energy. So yeah, it's been so cool to actually rediscover that.
Like, what did it look like when you made the decision, I guess, like let go or try and like fight or whatever, that like perfectionism and the fear of failure and stuff? Like, was it a conscious choice, do you think? Or do you think as you just started doing more creative stuff, you were able to move through it? Does that make sense?
So when I went to college for design, they teach you the idea generation process. So I always thought that creative people, these ideas would just came to them and they would just make it. And I think there are some people like that, but it's really about filing things, not necessarily physically or on Pinterest or whatever, but you're always sort of filing things away, and everything comes from somewhere. And so creativity is kind of you're pulling together things that already exist, using techniques that other people have used, that all that kind of stuff. And it's combining all these different techniques and colors and ideas in new ways. So just even understanding that was kind of a big leap for me. And I also have just got the more stuff I've made, whether it's graphic design or painting or arty stuff, the more confident I am that the end result will be something that I'm happy with, and also the more comfortable I am if it's not. I know it doesn't really matter. So, and I think it's just becoming more secure in, the idea that your value doesn't depend on your productivity or your output or what you're putting into the world.
Yeah, that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
It's so huge. It's the most, that just as you are is like fine and enough.
That's actually pretty massive, isn't it? That idea. I'd never thought about that. I just wish I'd felt like this, my whole life.
Yes.
I wish I'd known all this stuff.
And I think it's a lot of people feel like this. It's why people sometimes can work so much, whatever, or, there's that external validation thing. But yeah, so many people just don't feel that just being them is enough.
Actually, something else that I've just realized is the more creative stuff I'm doing just for myself and for work, the less I feel I don't want to share it on social media necessarily. I'm not doing it to show anyone. So I just haven't posted on Instagram for weeks. And I will, but I think getting out of that, I guess I'm not marketing my business as much on Instagram anymore, but I'm not making anything for anyone else at the moment. And I'm so comfortable with that. I feel so much happier not feeling like I need to constantly be sharing on social media.
When I think about the life you've built, it feels almost like, not in a contrived way, but you've built this life that is actually about like living and like fundamental almost to who like you and Chris are and your family. Do you think that that's been like conscious, or you've just kind of ended up?
Initially, it was all sort of circumstantial. So I needed to leave Sydney for various reasons. I went still, technically in Sydney, but I needed to move away from the city. And I also needed to have a break from the stressful sort of industry, job in a stressful industry. And just, I think we moved here because I really needed to heal, as woo-woo as that sounds, but I needed to move away. And so I left that job and, retrained as a florist, which also wasn't quite the right industry or job for me at that time. And then I knew I needed to do design or I would regret it forever. I just should have done it straight out of school, but it wasn't even in my mind as an option. So I did that, and I think, and I was home. I've been home with the kids for their whole lives, and having done, and that was sort of circumstantial as well. I always did feel like I should have been working or doing other stuff, sort of from day one since Frankie was born. But I've realized that it's actually really important to be around and available and connected to them. So I think we ended up in this sort of life because of the circumstances, but now I've realized it's actually ideal. We've got a really good, and we have made some changes. So I could have just stayed home and not retrained and not worked, but I knew that for my own sanity and to be a role model to the kids and for Chris, for our relationship, my relationship with Chris, it was important for me to have a bit more financial independence and just a bit of sort of equity in that way. So yeah, we have made tweaks to sort of find the right balance.
Yes. And we had a conversation, I don't know, ages ago, well, whatever, I don't know, a while ago. And we were talking about nature and like how it is healing and like the importance of like living in nature. And I think the lifestyle you guys have is like the perfect balance of actually living in nature, like you're in the national park, yet still being connected to like the city, or you're only an hour from the city and things like that. So you've got this really good balance of both. But I'm really curious like what it means for you to like be living in nature
And also what it means for you when you say like nature is healing and why you think it is healing and how, yeah, how that looks for you, I guess.
So I think the living in nature for us, we're in the middle of the national park. We've got 4 beaches within walking distance. It's a funny little villagey town that we're in. We've got the park across the road that's full of angophores. We drive through national park for 20 minutes to get home. If we go anywhere, we either drive through the bush for 20 minutes or we get the ferry across a beautiful, you know, river, which is just ridiculous. We're so lucky. And so I think, it's just we are just physically surrounded by nature, and that makes it really easy to have a swim before work in the morning, or take the dog down to the beach, or go for a bushwalk to the most spectacular cliffs you can imagine. And it's our life. It's such a big part of our life, just being in the bush and near the beach. It's our lifestyle. And in terms of how it's healing, I think it makes you aware that you're part of something bigger. And so during COVID lockdowns, we were going bushwalking and a lot, to stay sane. And the flowers were still, the seasons were still the same, and the birds were still doing their thing. And it's just, life goes on no matter what's happening in your own life. The world keeps turning, and you're just a tiny speck, on this planet. So I've been doing this bushwalk out to the coast, and you walk out and it just drops. Have you ever been out there with me to the balconies? Yeah. And it just drops like 200 meters or something into the ocean, and the whales come past. And I've been doing that walk a lot because the whale season's just started, and I feel drawn out there. It's so crazy. At the end of May and June, I just feel like I need to be.
Oh, really?
I'm like obsessed with, saying hello to the whales. I drive to the top of Bundina and it's like a 10-minute walk. You might see other bushwalkers, but there's all this other stuff going on. There's, depending on the time of year, the flowers are blooming, or there's heaps of bird action and all this other stuff. And you just think, oh, I'm just like, I do not matter to anything that's going on. Like, we are not the center of the universe. I think living in a city, or, in a high density kind of area, it's very human centric and very individualistic, and everyone's rushing around. But as soon as you get away from all the other people and the buildings and the traffic and stuff, it's like, oh, it gives you perspective about sort of where we are, where we sit in the order of things. And actually, the world goes on without us. Probably it would be better off in some ways without us. And just the rhythms, like there's all this stuff, because we've been here so long and I've really got to know the bush. It's like, so the flowers start blooming sort of midwinter, a lot of the Australian native flowers. But, initially I thought, oh, it's not spring yet. That's weird. But actually, we made spring up, like, and the Indigenous seasons are kind of completely different to what we call them. We've just imported them from the Northern Hemisphere, and it's actually not real. Oh, so the whales like start coming. There are these plants called Gymea lilies that with the massive red flowers. When they start blooming, that's when the whales come. And if the flowers start earlier, the whales come earlier.
Oh my God.
And if they start, yeah. So it's just like, so I think it's given me perspective. There's just that beautiful kind of gentle level of stimulation when you're out in nature. It's like nothing's competing for your attention. There's so much going on, but you can sort of decide what to pay attention to. Just fresh air. It's the same for kids. Like we could be at home with the TV on, or they're on their devices fighting and the energy's bad. And I just drag them down to the beach, kicking and screaming. And then 5 minutes later, it's calm. Like everyone's nervous systems have kind of reset. And yeah, so I think it's just so important to have that access to nature, even if it's just a park. Like, I don't think I'm super lucky to have all these bushwalks and beaches and stuff really close by, but I just think, yeah, there's something about trees and birds and just removing yourself a little bit from buildings and traffic that's really important.
Well, like for so many reasons, because like that's our home. Like if we think like biologically, right? Like our to be like surrounded by trees or to hear the birds or in the sand, whatever. Like think from like a biological standpoint, our bodies haven't like caught up with the fact that we live in cities now, or we can live in cities. So then when you're in nature, yeah, it's like this calmness because it's like, oh, I'm
It's a
home,
reset,
like for lack
totally.
of a better phrase, like this is what I know and what I'm familiar with from like a biological standpoint.
And I think a massive, massive thing is that there's nothing wants your attention. Like in at home, there's like screens, advertising like in cities, billboards, and there's just so much kind of stimulation, and yeah, it's just different. Also, I just think it's that getting joy and delight out of little things like the flowers or the sun on your face or feeling the wind. It's the best things in life are free.
Yeah, but it's actually true. And I think it's really easy to miss those little things because you're rushing or you're looking at your phone, checking emails when you're cooking, whatever, like it's
Or you live in the city and there's, shadows, there is no sun. Or, I mean, yeah, even if you do live in the city, there are parks and you can put your feet on the grass and look up at the trees. Sounds so cheesy, but it's actually so fundamentally important, I think.
And even little things like obviously like I'm like obsessed with your house and Bundina and everything, but one of the big things in your house, the thing I always notice is whatever those like light refracting thingies like from the thing. But even like, and they're always on your pictures on the wall opposite the kitchen and things, the rainbow light. But even something as simple as that is like, it's so beautiful.
Yes.
And so simple. And when you actually like see it, like I think I only started like seeing that sort of stuff in the last few years, probably. And when you see it, you're like, it's like this reminder that like, oh yeah, there's like beauty and good almost. That sounds so lame, but I actually think it's true.
Yeah, totally. And I think when you're wrapped up in stress or, trauma or whatever, you don't see that. It's not important because you just need to be surviving. And when you move through that, and actually to help move through a kind of state like that, just tuning into that stuff, I think can be really helpful.
Yeah, and it's like tuning into it takes you out of your mind. So it stops kind of the rumination or the whatever's going in your head, and you can like just stop and you actually see it. The other, from an outsider's perspective, but the other really cool and I think unique thing about Bundina where you live is this like sense of community. And it just feels like that. Okay, I know it's so lame because I talk about it.
No. I'm just thinking I made the mistake of looking at the Bundina community notice board on Facebook the other day, and I was like, why did I do this? Anyway,
so
sorry,
there's challenges for sure.
Pros and cons.
But there's a real community spirit. And one thing that sticks out to me of like the difference of like living in a community versus not is like a couple of months ago up the road here, a house burnt down, like I think literally to the ground, probably 5 houses up, but just heard it from the neighbor, don't know who lives there, don't know if they still live there, blah 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 blah. When that happened, I remember a story you told of someone's house burning down, and even though you didn't know the person, everyone kind of came together and was donating money, but then also like clothes, and that's something that stuck out to me. But I'm curious like what community and like living in a community almost like looks and feels like community, I think, is something that people talk a lot about and, you know, are aware that maybe there's this gap. But yeah, what does that like mean and look like to you, living in this kind of like almost close-knit community?
So I think there's sort of two. So there's the Bundeena and Mainbar community, which is about, I think there's about 3,000 people. And that looks like you said, if someone experiences a tragedy, the whole community will pull together and support them. There are some really cool community events like the Art of Living Festival every year, which is really fun. And so there is that, people feel connected, even people that you have never met before, you're connected to them because you live in this special place. But I think I've sort of found a community within the larger kind of local community, which is with, I think they're all other mothers, or, you know, families. And I mean, that is next level kind of support, because we all provide so much support to each other and get so much support from each other. So with childcare and, you know, if someone's sick or someone's going through, you know, a family member's ill or something, we all cook for each other. We do meal drop-offs. There's just constant checking in. And that is so special. And that's something I never thought I would have it. And I think it's something that until pretty recently, like the last couple of 100 years or something, it's just how people lived. And I actually don't know how people do it without that support. It's also nice, you know, sort of on a more surface level, taking the dog for a walk and you say hello to every single person. You're just connected. Even if it's just a hello, you are recognizing that the other person is a person. And everybody, if you walk past someone in Bundeena, you'll smile and say hello. If you know them, you'll have a little chat. It's so nice. It's that is so nice. And yeah, I think Dad's been for a couple of walks up to the shops with us before, and he's just like, you know, everybody. And I actually don't, but you just say hello to everybody. And it's just that little moment of connection, I guess.
Yeah, and the incidental stuff, like you said. Again, I remember you've said before, maybe over the summer holidays or something, you just go down to the beach and there's
oh yes,
there. So it mitigates, and obviously you still do this, but it's not like the social connection then comes from planning all the time. It happens, and you're all kind of like part of this, of just living, you know, but then it's happening along the way, which I think is really beautiful.
It makes me so happy now the kids just can walk to their friends' houses, and then they'll take themselves off to a friend's house, and then an hour later they'll all show up here and they can just move freely and they have that independence. And I do think we don't have any busy roads or anything like that. It's kind of a small town and it feels safe for them to do that. So that helps a lot, I think, with that kind of stuff.
But we've spoken about how like it's really hard, or there are barriers, almost being your own as a woman. And this is all quite a big generalization. It's being like a woman and a mother while still having a career and like being your own person and nurturing that side of yourself. It's really hard to do that in, I guess, this day and age. I guess, what's been your experience with that? What does it look like to be able to have more of that balance across family being a priority, but also yourself being a priority?
I think it sounds like a total cliche, but the whole putting your oxygen mask on before helping the kids kind of thing. If you are not filled up and doing the things you love doing, you're not going to bring your best self to your children. And I remember when the kids were tiny, I was so depleted. You know, I had nothing, and I don't think I was my best. You know, I was exhausted, and I was also really bored because it's just not very interesting. Like pushing a kid on a swing for 4 hours and then going home and doing dishes and like dealing with tantrums. Like it's beautiful in its way, but it's not interesting. And I think I really it's really important for me. And also I think some people love that and love being in the trenches. It's really important. So two things for me, I think, is solitude. I need peace and quiet. I need time by myself. And I didn't get that for years. And I also need to be challenged mentally. I think I need to be learning, or my brain needs to be working. And that's another thing that just, it doesn't, well, I think everybody does. I'm so smart. But I think without those things, I wasn't, I was not happy, I can't remember what your question was now.
Just the balance, or like, yeah, so kind of like being a parent, the parent you want to be, whatever that looks like for you, but then also prioritizing like yourself and your career and, the things that like nourish you as a person.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. Oh my God. I'm on a total tangent. So yes, I do think you need to take care of yourself. It's not good for your children. I've just listened to a Glennon Doyle podcast, which we need to speak about.
Okay.
Yesterday. Oh my gosh, it was amazing. But I always think, would I want Frankie to be completely, if she has children one day, would I want her to neglect herself and disappear in child rearing? No. Like, she's a human, and even when she has children, she'll still be a super smart, creative, vibrant human.
Yes.
And she needs to be that person. And I want to show that to her. I want to show, and Theo, show them both that it's like a self-respect thing too.
Two things. I think it's like, we sort of spoke about it before, but it's that acknowledgement that there are different parts of ourselves and being a parent is just one. And it's also the acknowledgement that depending on where you're at, sometimes that self might be work, it might be doing a course if the kids are young and going back to work doesn't make sense, or whatever, but it can look many different ways depending on where you're at. But I've really, it's also just that acknowledgement of like, where there's so many different parts of us.
And it's also about them, your children, of course you want to give them everything and be the best parent that you possibly can, but that definitely doesn't mean giving them everything they want and being there 100% of the time. I think for resilience and just, not raising narcissists, they're actually not the center of the universe. They're the center of your universe for a little while, but it's not good for children to have a slave.
They're not built for attention 24/7. Not necessarily to refer to like, when we were cave people, because obviously we're not anymore. But I think biologically we may be we're still somewhat wired the same way in many respects. But back in the day, kids were just cruising around with their parents, strapped to the back. They weren't sat down getting attention 24 hours a day.
Yeah, and there's a whole lot of research and stuff about how constantly giving them stimulus and things to do, and this is what we're doing now we're going to read a book, now we're going to play with this, now we're going to do this, that's taking away their opportunity to be creative. And they need to be, I don't think I'm that good at this, actually. I'm getting better, but they need to be bored sometimes so they can come up with their own ideas and their own stuff to do. I remember you just got left to your own devices and came up with games and stuff and prescribing, okay, it's time to read a book, or also it's just so draining. You just can't. Also, I guess I've never thought about this, but by constantly entertaining them, you're teaching them that they always need to be doing something.
Yeah, and they can't actually then just be. It's like, if a kid's sitting and look around, and I'm guilty of this, I realize I do it and I'm like now conscious of it, so I really stop. But I'm like, Bandy's just sitting, I'm like, oh, do you want this? It's like, no, just
oh my gosh,
she's cool,
she's like chilling. when she's doing that, she's in her most pure kind of, she's just being, and she's just feeling the sun on her face or listening to the birds outside or whatever it is. She doesn't need that stimulation.
Kids are so good at just
being,
which, like we were saying before, it's like really hard for adults to do. I'm scared she's going to wake up soon, so I want to ask this question just in case. I'm also
scared she's going to wake up.
Keep chatting. But so as a parent, as someone who I think as a parent has actually not changed, but worked on your own stuff as you're being a parent, what is the biggest thing you've taken from parenthood? And how do you think, what lessons have you learned, I guess, during it? What strength have you taken from being a parent?
Well, that's such a good question. I think I've learned that you don't have to do what everyone else is doing. I think just because your children see everything you do and they're learning lessons from what you do. And I think what it is probably what success means to me actually is not what we're taught that a successful life is. Again, the Glennon Doyle podcast. Do you listen to it?
I didn't realize she had a podcast.
It's called We Can Do Hard Things.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Somebody, a listener called in and said she's measuring her success by the number of naps she has a week. And it's just, so I think I've learned that I really felt when I first had my first baby that I should be working, I should have an awesome career and be earning heaps of money. And, I was a smart kid, so I really should have this amazing job. And I don't feel like that at all anymore. I feel like I want to work and earn a bit of money, for financial independence and stability, but really mostly to be growing, learning and growing as a person and growing my skills and things like that. And for me, I think having the kids has taught me that success for me is balance and growth. And what was the other part of your question?
I can't remember. Was it something about like, I can't actually remember. It was I think what I was thinking about was like, people talk about parenthood, which I just literally did, as being like really hard and challenging.
Really hard. Yeah.
But almost flipping that to like what you gain from it. So I was thinking like maybe for me, I don't know, you realize like your strengths or whatever it is amongst the hardness of it. So like almost like flipping, what have you gained from parenthood, either just like from a life point of view, but also like what you've realized about yourself and your own strengths, I guess.
I think another thing it does is give you perspective. So you can do everything right and think. So I guess it's perspective and sort of perspective about what's important. That's one thing, and priorities, and just kind of going with the flow, like being flexible. And kids, it's sort of, oh God, it's that Buddhist, it's like you can't control everything. Kids will, like, you can do everything right and they'll break their arm or, drop a bowl. Oh my God, Frankie the other day was lying on the daybed outside holding a rock, like a big rock above her head. And I was looking at her thinking, that's a bad idea. But like, you're constantly telling them, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And nothing ever happens. Of course, she dropped it on her head. And it's like, anything can happen and you just have to roll with it. She was fine. So, yes. Oh my God. I'm failing
I can't ever remember what it was. I think what you said about like what success looks like for you is like a big thing as well, because it's so easy to just do and think you want XYZ and blah, blah, blah. But actually thinking and then based on what it looks and feels like, making decisions to kind of build a successful life, whatever that may be. For some people it might be, living in a van or being a CEO or whatever. Like it looks so different. Based on the person, but actually like considering what that looks like is, and also being okay with not having it straight away. So like you knew you wanted to do something for yourself and try different things. Same for me, I've tried but also being okay with trying different things and knowing that it'll eventually lead to something.
I do think if I had listened to my little inner voice years earlier, I probably would have ended up sort of where I wanted to be sooner. It doesn't matter, because I guess I learned, a lot on the way, but I think I was just out of touch with that sort of intuition. Yeah, so I think listening to your intuition is important.
It's interesting that intuition things I've recorded maybe 3 podcasts, and that intuition thing has come up a lot. And why, I'm curious, like, why it's so hard in general to listen to that, just for yourself maybe, but also generally, and how we would be if we were more connected to our intuition.
I don't think I listened when I was younger because it contradicted what I had been told who I was. I wasn't an arty kid, or it wasn't that I was told that it wasn't that I was told that I wasn't those things. It was that I was told I was something else, and I thought they were two mutually exclusive things. So it wasn't in line with what other people were telling me that I was. It's not that I thought I was this academic kid. I didn't know who I was, but I was just listening to other people. And, the fact that I got into this school for smart kids and the class for smart kids. So it's not just individuals telling you, it's the world pushing you in this direction. And I think if everybody was more in tune with their intuition, this is like, I hate these kind of cheesy words, but if everyone was living more authentically, I guess it doesn't suit, our capitalist society for people to be tuning into that and not just prioritizing earning as much money as possible. But I think everyone would just be more connected, just more content, and not, striving for more money and more stuff. And if you're just happy in yourself and living authentically, is there a better word? Is there a less cheesy word? You know what I mean? I think the world would just be a more peaceful place. And it's not an option for everybody, I guess, especially with work and stuff like that. But a lot of people are pretty out of touch with, and I'm not saying that I'm amazingly in touch, but when I did listen to that voice one time, it's completely changed my life.
And I would also say, like, the more you do it, the more comfortable one becomes. The more you recognize it.
Well, I guess you're getting that positive reinforcement, like, oh, I did what my, subconscious was telling me, and now I feel like this. And so, yeah, and you do tune into it more. It's so true.
When you tune into it, I'm going to butcher this because I don't know how to describe it, but like, say having this career change, going into design, doing the course, freelancing, like, there was a knowing, or this is the sense I got, there was a knowing that it would all work out. And it's almost like, because you just knew it's what you should be doing. There wasn't this trying to control, I'm going to get this job, or I need this job, and la la, because you weren't trying to control it because you knew it was all going to unfold, kind of. And I think that's actually something amazing you do with Frankie and Theo, is let them be themselves and build that sense of self and tuning into themselves. But that is like an important part of, I don't know, building that next generation.
And I think with that, it's about, it is really hard to look at this objectively, but you will always think your child is a certain way or a certain person. And every now and again, you just have to stop and think, what am I projecting onto this kid? What am I telling this kid about who they are? And just paying close attention to, who they really are, and not who you want them to be or think they are. And I'll be so proud of them, both of them, if they just follow their hearts and live lives that are really true to who they are.